My name is Evelyn Cross, and the night this story begins was my 36th birthday. 40 guests, black tie dress code, live jazz, soft enough to sound expensive, crystal glasses arranged with military precision, a house so quiet you could hear money breathing. If you've ever walked into a room where everyone is smiling, but you know without evidence, without confirmation that you no longer belong there, you'll understand the temperature that night. Cold, polished, controlled, like winter pretending to be luxury. I arrived on time, not early, not late. Timing matters when people are watching. I wore black, no statement jewelry, no attempt to compete with the room. When you understand power, you stop dressing for approval. People turned, smiled, kissed my cheek, complimented the event, the wine, the view. No one said happy birthday with any urgency. That was fine. This wasn't about me to them. It never had been. Halfway through dessert, my father stood. Richard Cross, chairman, founder, patriarch, a man who had never raised his voice because he never needed to. Silence had always worked better for him. He lifted his wine glass just high enough to command attention. Not a toast, a declaration. The room responded immediately. Conversations stopped, chairs angled toward him. People like knowing where authority is seated. He looked at me. "You know, Evelyn," he said calmly, "you're not even half the woman your 16-year-old sister is." No anger, no humor, no emphasis, just a statement, like reading numbers off a balance sheet. There was a pause, not discomfort, calculation. Then my mother smiled. She smiled before the sentence even finished landing. Margaret always smiled when things were cruel. It made her feel refined. "Really," she added, touching her napkin to her lips, "you should be grateful we still let you live here." Across the room, my sister Luna laughed. Legs crossed, new watch flashing under the chandelier, phone already in her hand. She held it up to show someone photos from a private jet she'd been on that weekend. She didn't look at me when she spoke. She didn't need to. "Some of us actually earn this life," she said. "Others just occupy space." 40 people heard it. No one spoke. You could feel the social math happening in real time. Who should look away? Who should pretend to sip their drink? Who needed this family's favor next quarter? If you were in that room, you might think the silence was neutral. It wasn't. Silence like that is an agreement. I didn't scream. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain my resume, my degrees, my revenue numbers, or the fact that I had been the operational backbone of the company for a decade. Explanation is what people ask for when they believe you're asking to stay. I wasn't. I pushed my chair back, slowly, enough for the legs to scrape against the marble floor. That sound did more than any argument ever could. It interrupted the narrative. It reminded the room that I was still present. I stood. I smiled, not warmly, not cruelly, precisely. Then I said, "Then you should start paying your own salary." My father blinked. I turned my eyes directly to him. Not challengingly, directly. "Why, Dad?" I continued. "Are you fired?" A pause. Effective tonight. The room froze. My father's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. My mother's smile collapsed in real time, like a mask slipping before it could be adjusted. Luna blinked once, twice, like someone who had just been struck without warning. No one laughed, no one moved, because tone matters, and my tone told the truth before the words finished arriving. When someone speaks from authority, the room knows, even before the facts catch up. My father opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "This isn't funny," he said. "I agree," I replied. "It isn't." That was the moment something shifted. Not in them, in me. I realized I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even disappointed. I was finished explaining myself, and if you've ever reached that place where silence feels heavier than shouting, you know what that means. My father looked around the room, searching for support. He didn't find it. Investors don't step into uncertainty without instruction. "You can't do this," he said finally. "This is my company." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt. I let the sentence settle, unanswered, just long enough to become uncomfortable. Then I said, "Well, discuss that at the board level." That was all. No elaboration, no defense, No justification, because justification implies doubt. My mother stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate," she said. "You're embarrassing us." I met her eyes. "I'm not," I said. "I'm documenting." Luna laughed again, but this time it was sharp, uncertain. "You're serious?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I am." That was the last thing I said that night. I picked up my clutch. I nodded once to the table, not in apology, not in farewell, in acknowledgement. Then I walked out of the room. Behind me, conversation didn't resume. It fractured, people whispered. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else stood and excused themselves. Power doesn't disappear all at once. It leaks. Outside, the air was cold, clean, honest. I stood there for a moment, listening to the house behind me, to the muted noise, the confusion, the beginning of fear. That was the night most people would call revenge. It wasn't. That was the night I stopped protecting people who had been preparing to erase me for years. If you were in my situation, you might think this was the beginning of the conflict. It wasn't. It was simply the first time they did it in public. The real beginning didn't happen in a ballroom. It happened 18 years earlier, in my father's study. Same house, same polished wood that absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. Same silence that makes you lower your voice even when no one asks you to. I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school. Tired in a clean, earned way, the kind of tired that comes from staying up late because you want something badly enough to sacrifice sleep for it. I had done everything right. 2 years of applications, interviews, essays rewritten until the words stopped sounding like mine, grades that left no room for interpretation. The envelope sat between us on my father's desk, thick paper, university seal, my name printed clearly, confidently, as if it belonged there. A full scholarship, tuition, housing, books, 4 years covered at a top-tier university. I waited for him to look at me. He didn't. He slid the envelope closer to himself and said, without lifting his eyes from the laptop, "We're keeping this." At first, I smiled. I genuinely thought it was a test. "For what?" I asked. He finally looked up. Not at the letter. At me. "Your mother and I may have a son someday," he said. "Hell need it more." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no pause to see if I understood. Just a financial decision delivered the way he delivered all of them, clean, unemotional, final. If you've never been dismissed that efficiently, it's hard to explain how quiet it feels. I remember nodding, not because I agreed, because I understood something important in that moment. Arguing wouldn't change the outcome. It would only give them the satisfaction of watching me try. So I nodded. I folded the letter. I stood up. I walked out of the room. No slammed doors. No tears. No last words. That night, while the house slept, I sat on my bed with my laptop open and applied for every student loan I qualified for. Federal, private, deferred, high interest, low interest. I signed promissory notes before I had ever signed a lease. I learned the language of interest rates, amortization schedules, and penalties before I learned the language of corporate governance. Debt is an efficient teacher. It doesn't care how unfair your story sounds. 4 years later, I graduated at the top of my class in real estate finance. No one attended the ceremony. I mailed the extra ticket back unused. I went home anyway. I didn't come back asking for money. I came back with numbers, projections, risk models, market analysis detailed enough to satisfy a conservative lender and cautious enough to survive scrutiny. I asked my parents to co-sign the incorporation documents so I could register the company under the family name. My mother laughed first. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was worse than that, soft and polite, like I had misunderstood something obvious. My father smiled. "This is a legacy business," he said. "Daughters don't run legacies." He paused, then added, "When we have a son, or at least someone worthy, we'll talk." That sentence didn't land emotionally. It landed structurally. That was the moment I learned something most people don't realize until much later. Some doors aren't closed because you're unqualified. They're closed because letting you in would threaten the structure behind them. They refused to let me use the family name, so I left without it. 2 suitcases. $3,000. Student loan statements that didn't care how motivated I was. I rented a studio apartment the size of a storage unit. I slept on a mattress on the floor. I ate meals that didn't require plates. I cold-called brokers who had never heard my name and didn't care to. I didn't ask my parents for money again. I closed my first strip mall lease before I turned 24. Then another. Then another. 10 years passed like that. Quietly, deliberately. By the time Crosswell Realty Group managed over 200 commercial properties across the Southeast, the market value had crossed 9 figures. On paper, I was the CEO. In practice, every major decision still required my father's signature. He liked it that way. He loved reminding investors that the company bore his last name, not mine. I smiled in meetings. I signed where I was told. I listened while he spoke as if I were an assistant instead of the person who had built the operating systems keeping the company alive. And all the while, I learned. I learned where authority actually lived. I learned how ownership could be moved without noise. I learned that documentation outlasts memory every single time. You wouldn't believe how much people reveal when they think you're grateful just to be in the room. They stopped watching me closely. That was their mistake. I wasn't building leverage out of anger. I was building it out of necessity. Because once you understand that you're optional to people who benefit from your labor, you stop trying to be chosen. You start preparing to choose yourself. And I did. Quietly. Leaving without the family name didn't feel dramatic. It felt logistical. 2 suitcases, $3,000. A stack of student loan statements thick enough to matter. I didn't announce my departure. I didn't ask for blessings. I didn't negotiate terms. When people show you exactly how little space they intend to give you, the cleanest response is to stop occupying their rooms. The studio apartment I rented barely qualified as one. No bedroom door, one window that looked directly into a brick wall. The kind of place that forces you to confront yourself because there's nowhere else to look. I slept on a mattress on the floor. I owned 1 plate, 1 mug, and a chair that wobbled if you leaned too far back. I learned quickly which expenses were optional and which ones weren't. Comfort didn't make the list. I worked during the day and studied at night. Market data, zoning laws, lease structures. I memorized cap rate formulas the way other people memorize song lyrics, not because I enjoyed it but because mastery reduces dependency. I started cold calling brokers at 8 every morning. Most hung up, some laughed. A few listened just long enough to tell me no. I kept calling. If you've never built something without social leverage, you don't realize how honest the process is. No favors, no shortcuts, no polite tolerance. Either you add value or the line goes dead. I closed my first strip mall lease before I turned 24. It wasn't impressive, it wasn't pretty, but it was mine. I didn't celebrate. I documented. Then I closed another, and another. Each deal taught me something different. How lenders think when they're nervous, how municipalities delay approvals without ever saying no, how contracts hide consequences in footnotes. Tenants failed, markets shifted. I absorbed losses without drama and adjusted without apology. I learned early that emotion slows execution. Years passed, quiet years, deliberate years. By the time I had a small portfolio under management, my phone started ringing instead of me dialing. Not because of my last name, because the numbers held. That's when my father re-entered the picture. Not personally, professionally. He didn't apologize for the past. He didn't acknowledge it at all. He spoke in the neutral language of opportunity. There's room for growth under the family umbrella, he said. We can formalize this. Translation. I had built something useful. Crosswell Realty Group absorbed my holdings. The company expanded rapidly after that. Capital moved more easily when his name sat on the letterhead. Investors relaxed. Doors opened. On paper, I was named CEO. In practice, authority remained centralized. Every major decision still required my father's signature. He liked reminding people of that. In meetings, he would speak over me not aggressively, just habitually. He corrected me when I didn't need correcting. He repeated my ideas in his own words and watched the room nod. I didn't interrupt. I took notes. I signed where I was told. If you were watching from the outside, you might think I was settling. I wasn't. I was observing. I watched how contracts moved. Who had signing authority? Which accounts were legacy accounts no one ever audited because that's how it's always been? I learned which lawyers answered to whom, which board members read the fine print, and which ones trusted reputation over language. Documentation tells the truth long after tone is forgotten. I became fluent in that language. I built the operating systems that kept the company running. Compliance, risk management, cash flow forecasting. I designed reporting structures that made inefficiency visible without accusing anyone. People began coming to me quietly, not for permission, for clarity. They didn't ask if something could be done. They asked how. That distinction matters. My father enjoyed the visibility, the speeches, the recognition dinners, the assumption that his name equaled control. I didn't correct anyone. Control doesn't need applause. There were moments, early on, when I considered confronting him, asking for formal authority, requesting recognition proportional to responsibility. I never did, because once you ask, you reveal uncertainty. Instead, I learned patience. Not the passive kind, the strategic kind. I watched how board members voted when my father wasn't in the room. I noted which clauses he skimmed past, which documents he signed without reading past the salary line. People reveal their blind spots through repetition. I waited. Years passed like that. Crosswell expanded across the Southeast. 200 commercial properties. 9-figure valuation. On paper, everything looked solid. But structures built on assumption always are, until they aren't. Privately, I began preparing. Not emotionally, structurally. I reviewed bylaws, updated internal controls, revised compliance protocols. Everything was framed as efficiency, risk reduction, best practice. No one objected. Why would they? When you speak in operational language, people assume you're managing details, not positioning leverage. I didn't rush. Rushing suggests urgency. Urgency invites scrutiny. I allowed my father to believe he was still indispensable. I allowed my mother to enjoy the social insulation the company provided. I allowed my sister to grow up believing proximity was achievement. Illusions are expensive but useful, because while they were enjoying the image of control, I was mapping its mechanics. If you were in my position, you might think this period required endurance. It didn't. It required clarity. I wasn't waiting for permission. I was waiting for alignment. And when it came, it wouldn't come loudly. It would arrive on paper. 14 months before my 36th birthday, I walked into my father's home office with a bottle of his favorite scotch and a folder tucked under my arm. Same room as before, same desk, same quiet that trained people to speak carefully. He looked up, surprised. Pleasantly so. Surprise makes people careless. "What's this?" he asked, nodding at the bottle. "A thank you," I said. "And a conversation you've been circling for years." He poured the scotch himself. Generous measure. Retirement had softened him in subtle ways. He liked being admired for what he had built. He liked the idea of being remembered as generous rather than controlling. "You've been talking about slowing down," I continued. "Let's make it official." I placed the folder on his desk and didn't open it. That mattered. Documents carry more weight when people believe they already understand them. He leaned back, relaxed. "I'm listening." I outlined it calmly. Chairman Emeritus. Guaranteed annual compensation. Full benefits. Office retained. Public acknowledgement of legacy. Everything a man like my father would want to hear without threatening his identity. My mother, seated near the window, clapped softly. "Oh, this is wonderful," she said. "I knew you'd come around." My father smiled and reached for the folder. He skipped ahead, straight to the compensation page. I watched him sign without reading past the numbers. That was the last mistake he made without realizing it. Because that contract didn't just define his exit. It defined authority. At-will employment. Termination without cause. Board-governed oversight. Delegated executive powers. The language was clean. Conservative. Standard enough not to raise suspicion, but precise enough to matter later. He closed the folder and slid it back toward me. "Well," he said, lifting his glass, "it's good to know the company's in capable hands." I smiled. "It always has been," I said. 3 weeks later, my attorney called me after midnight. His voice was calm, controlled, the tone professionals use when they know something matters. "Your father wants to draft a new irrevocable trust," he said. "Everything transfers to your sister when she turns 18. Your name isn't included." I didn't react. I didn't sit up. I didn't swear. I didn't ask why. Emotion clouds sequence, and sequence was all that mattered now. I asked one question. "Did he email you from the company address?" "Yes." That was enough. Because loyalty isn't inherited. It's documented, and using corporate resources for personal estate planning carries implications. I leaned back against the headboard. "Tell him yes," I said. "Tell him you'll start immediately." There was a pause. "Evelyn," he said carefully. "That means—" "From this moment on," I interrupted. "Every dollar he spends is technically mine." Silence. Then a slow exhale. "Understood," he said. "What do you want me to prepare?" "A mirror plan," I said. "Something hell never see." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, because clarity had arrived. By sunrise, I had mapped every asset, every entity, every signature authority still floating in my father's name. Shell companies, holding structures, banking portals, legacy accounts no one had audited in years. 47 moves, that was the number. Each one small enough to avoid attention, each one necessary, each one timed. The first move happened the next morning. I called an emergency board session. I didn't invite my parents. No explanation, no confrontation. The resolution passed unanimously. My father had missed the last 4 meetings. Attendance clauses matter when people stop paying attention. I was voted in as the sole managing partner of the parent LLC. That vote didn't change the signage, it didn't change the letterhead, it didn't change my father's confidence, but it changed authority. The second move was quieter. I established the EC Irrevocable Trust in Delaware. Independent trustees, clean governance, clear separation. My attorney handled the filings before lunch. From that day forward, every new lease, every refinance, every acquisition flowed directly into the trust. The old assets stayed where they were. For now, illusion matters. Especially to people who believe control is permanent. I kept the corporate credit cards active. I left my father's name on the country club membership. I approved my mother's request for a new vehicle without hesitation. Every swipe, every wire, every approval. Documented. 6 weeks earlier, I had hired a forensic accountant. He worked off a secure server no one else could access. Every transaction flowed into a shadow ledger designed to survive audit scrutiny, personal expenses coded as client entertainment, tuition listed as employee development, real estate titled to minors under marketing allocations. It added up faster than I expected. My sister posted everything: private jets, resorts, shopping bags, captions about living her best life before college. I didn't react. I forwarded the charges. My accountant flagged each one. Fraud indicators, misappropriation patterns, tax exposure. By the 3rd month, the total crossed $2 million. My father loved retirement. He told people I had finally learned my place. He thanked me publicly for being generous. He signed documents without reading the memos. The memos referenced the trust. I started requiring 2 signatures on checks over $500. Mine and his. He liked that. It made him feel relevant. By the 8th month, the trust quietly owned the majority of the operating entities. My father still believed he controlled everything because the checks bore his name. He didn't realize the accounts could now be frozen by one person: me. That was when I filed the whistleblower complaint. Anonymously, through my attorney's firm, transaction records, board minutes. Screenshots. 2 years of documented misrepresentation. The IRS acknowledgement arrived 9 days later. Case number assigned. Investigation opened. I didn't celebrate. I booked a venue. Same ballroom my father had used for his 60th birthday. Same caterer. Same quartet. Familiarity lowers defenses. I sent the invitations myself. Handwritten. Cream paper. Measured tone. Please join me in celebrating 36 years and the next chapter of the company." My father called to say he was proud. My mother asked if she could wear a new watch I'd purchased for my sister. I said yes. 3 days before the event, I invited Mrs. Alvarez, our housekeeper of 23 years, and asked her to sit near the front. She met my eyes and nodded. She had watched everything. Every seat was assigned, every slide timed, every document verified. Because when truth arrives, it shouldn't have to raise its voice. Once the whistleblower complaint was filed, I didn't wait for validation. I waited for sequence. People misunderstand strategy. They imagine it as a dramatic pivot, a visible escalation. In reality, strategy is a series of small decisions that only make sense once they're complete. 47 moves. That number wasn't symbolic. It was precise. Each move addressed a single vulnerability. Each one isolated risk. Each one reduced dependency. None of them announced themselves. The first weeks were administrative. I revised internal approval thresholds under the guise of post-retirement governance cleanup. Anything over $500 required dual authorization. My father signed without comment. He liked seeing his name included. It reassured him. Reassurance is a powerful anesthetic. Next came banking access. Legacy accounts tied to older entities were migrated to a consolidated platform for audit readiness. No one objected. Auditors make people cooperative. I became the primary administrator. My father retained view-only access. He didn't notice the distinction. I updated vendor contracts, standardized language, clear termination clauses, indemnification tightened, liability traced to decision-makers, not figureheads. Then came personnel. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't demote anyone. I reassigned reporting lines, quietly. People who had historically bypassed me now had to submit documentation. Requests that once moved informally now required written justification. Some bristled, most adapted. Those who adapted stayed. Those who didn't revealed themselves. That information went into a separate file. Meanwhile, my forensic accountant continued his work. He didn't editorialize. He didn't speculate. He categorized. Transaction date, amount, entity, purpose, personal benefit indicator. He flagged patterns, not incidents. Luxury travel billed as client outreach, tuition payments listed as professional development, real estate titled to minors under promotional initiatives. Every entry referenced a document, an invoice, a transfer record, a digital receipt. By the end of the 4th month, the shadow ledger was undeniable. $2.1 million. And growing. My sister made that part easy. She documented her own spending more thoroughly than any auditor ever could. She tagged locations, named brands, posted timestamps. I never commented. I never warned her. I forwarded the data. My accountant appended each image to its corresponding transaction record. Public representations paired with private misuse create clarity. At home, nothing changed. I approved my mother's household expenses without delay. I renewed the country club membership. I kept holiday bonuses intact. Illusion requires maintenance. My father enjoyed telling people how smoothly retirement suited him. He spoke about trust, about legacy, about how relieved he felt knowing the company was finally in responsible hands. I didn't correct him. Correction would have interrupted momentum. Instead, I focused on control points. Ownership percentages shifted quietly as new acquisitions flowed into the EC irrevocable trust. Old entities remained untouched, like museum pieces visible, admired, irrelevant. New value moved elsewhere. By the 8th month, the trust held a controlling interest in the operational core of the business. The checks still bore my father's name. The authority no longer did. That distinction matters in court. I began documenting board attendance more rigorously. Minutes were detailed. Votes recorded individually, absences noted without commentary. When my father missed another meeting, it was logged neutrally. Attendance clauses don't sound threatening until they're enforced. I consulted outside counsel for a second opinion, then a third. Consistency matters when decisions will eventually be examined by people who weren't there. Every advisor reached the same conclusion. The structure was sound. The exposure wasn't mine. That was when I authorized the next step. The whistleblower complaint had already been acknowledged. a case number assigned. The process was underway, but processes move at their own pace. I didn't wait for action. I prepared for convergence. I booked the venue. Same ballroom my father had used for his 60th birthday. Same caterer, same quartet, same lighting designer. Familiarity lowers defenses. People relax when they recognize the environment. I sent the invitations myself. Handwritten notes, thick cream paper, no embellishment. Please join me in celebrating 36 years and the next chapter of the company. The phrasing was deliberate. Not my birthday. Not a celebration. A chapter. My father called within an hour. His voice was warm, proud. I always knew you'd come into your own, he said. I've learned a lot, I replied. That was true. My mother asked if she could wear the new watch I'd purchased for my sister. I said yes. Approvals build precedent. 3 days before the event, I made one final call. Mrs. Alvarez. She had worked in that house for 23 years. She had seen everything that had ever mattered. She had cleaned up after arguments, after celebrations, after silence. I invited her personally. I asked her to sit near the front. She didn't ask why. She nodded. Witnesses don't always testify with words. Sometimes they simply need to be present. The presentation was finalized 48 hours before the event. Every slide time-coded, every document cross-referenced, every claim supported by record. I rehearsed it once, not out loud, silently, because this wasn't a performance. It was a disclosure. The night before the event, I slept 8 hours. Not because I was calm, because the system was ready. If you've ever been underestimated quietly, you know this feeling. It isn't excitement, it's alignment. Everything finally sitting where it belongs. The day of the event arrived without ceremony. No nerves, no anticipation, just sequence. I woke early, reviewed the final agenda, and approved the last compliance memo my assistant had flagged overnight. Routine has a way of keeping emotions in their place. By noon, confirmations were complete. 40 guests, same number as before, same families, same investors, same cousins who only appeared when there was something to gain. People don't change seats unless the structure forces them to. I arrived at the venue 30 minutes early. The ballroom looked exactly the way my father liked things to look, expensive without being loud. Gold light, white orchids. Tables spaced just far enough apart to signal exclusivity without sacrificing density. The quartet rehearsed softly. Familiarity lowers defenses. My attorney, Nathan Cole, arrived through the service entrance, calm, prepared, no briefcase visible. The documents were already uploaded to the secure drive, mirrored on 2 offline backups. We didn't rehearse. There was no need. By the time the first guests arrived, the structure had already moved. They just didn't know it yet. My father arrived early. He always did when he wanted to be seen. Third bourbon by the time appetizers were cleared. Retirement had made him nostalgic and careless. He enjoyed telling stories that centered him as the architect of everything in the room. My mother floated between tables in silk and diamonds, collecting compliments like interest payments. She spoke about family, about gratitude, about how proud she was that everything stayed intact. My sister stood near the center, phone in hand, already filming. She had asked if she could use the screen ID rented. I said yes. Visibility can be useful. This is the apartment Dad closed on last week, Luna announced, loud enough for half the room to hear. The screen filled with photos. Midtown, 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling glass. It's mine when I turn 18. Polite laughter followed. Someone raised a glass. To the next generation. My father stepped forward and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. That's right, he said. Some people earn the world just by existing. He paused. Then he looked directly at me. Others, he continued, just take up space. The quartet kept playing. The room didn't. My mother smiled. Be grateful we still keep a roof over your head, Evelyn. Most women your age would kill for this life. Luna flipped her hair back. Exactly. Some of us don't need to beg for crumbs. 40 faces turned toward me. Phones lowered. Forks froze mid-air. This time, I didn't need to stand abruptly. I set my champagne glass down. The clink echoed louder than it should have. I walked to the center of the room, calm, unhurried. "This," I said evenly, "is actually my birthday present to myself." I raised one finger. The lights dimmed. The quartet stopped mid-note. A low mechanical hum came from the ceiling as the chandelier lifted, revealing the projector concealed inside it. Nathan stepped forward. Remote in hand. Slide 1 appeared. Notice of employment determination, Richard Cross, Chairman Emeritus. Effective immediately. A ripple moved through the room. My father stared at the screen. "What is this?" my mother whispered. "Turn it off, right now," Nathan clicked. Slide 2. My father's employment agreement. His signature circled in red. The termination clause highlighted. At-will employment. Termination without cause. No severance. "This is insane," my father said. "I own this company." Slide 3. Board resolution. Signed. Dated 14 months prior. Voting rights revoked. Slide 4. Organizational chart. My name at the top. His crossed out. Luna laughed. Sharp. Nervous. "This is a joke, right?" Nathan clicked again. Slide 5. Transaction records. Dates. Amounts. Entity names. $2.1 million categorized as future residential development. $412,000 listed as European cultural outreach. 6 figures billed as executive training. Each traced to personal accounts. Phones came back up. Not discreetly this time. Slide 6. IRS acknowledgement letter. Official seal. Case number visible. Investigation opened into tax fraud, misappropriation of corporate funds, and false filings. A glass shattered near the back of the room. My father stepped forward. 2 off-duty officers previously seated as guests stood and blocked his path without a word. Slide 7. EC Irrevocable Trust. The room went quiet as the slides advanced. Sole grantor. Sole authority. 100% ownership. My father's voice cracked. "You can't do this. The company has my name on it." Nathan clicked again. Articles of Amendment. Name change effective in 48 hours. EC Holdings, LLC. All references to Crosswell removed. My mother sank into her chair. Luna screamed. Account closures followed. Corporate cards. Personal cards. Effective at midnight. "This is illegal," Luna shouted. Nathan clicked once more. Photos from social media appeared: jets, yachts, shopping bags, each stamped with the transaction record that paid for it. The whispers began. "This," I said calmly, stepping forward, "isn't revenge. It's documentation." I thanked the guests, mentioned dessert, and watched as security escorted my parents and sister out. My father didn't look back. Power didn't disappear when they left. It lingered unassigned, waiting. I didn't rush to fill it. By morning, 14 missed calls waited on my phone. I returned none. I read instead emails from counsel, bank confirmations, regulatory receipts. Authority had been recognized because it was properly documented. Emotion never entered the system. My father's credentials failed on his first login attempt. User not authorized. Systems don't negotiate. Luna posted once more before the card stopped working. It stayed up 6 minutes, then vanished. The silence afterward was louder than anything Shed ever said. At 10 a.m., I held my first executive meeting. Same room, different posture. They didn't fear me. They aligned. I approved delayed acquisitions, terminated contracts that survived on proximity alone, authorized a permanent forensic audit. Transparency isn't punishment, it's insulation. At noon, my mother messaged, "You didn't have to humiliate us." Humiliation requires intent. I had executed policy. Press inquiries came. I declined interviews. Statements went out through counsel. Neutral, factual, boring. Boring is good. That night, I returned to my apartment. Same brick wall. Same quiet. Control didn't feel like triumph. It felt like stillness, the kind that comes when noise stops pretending it's substance. My sister had confused access with ownership, attention with leverage. Those mistakes are expensive. My father had spoken over me for years, training me to listen. Dominance doesn't teach strength. It teaches blindness. The locks at the old house were changed the next morning. Not out of spite. Out of procedure. Negotiations followed. No emotion. No history. One written response. Simple terms. My father signed within 48 hours. Silence became the agreement. EC Holdings stabilized quickly. Markets prefer clarity over charisma. We closed deals quietly. I moved into a slightly larger place. Nothing dramatic, just space that worked. I didn't attend holidays, not from bitterness, from distance. Some bridges don't burn, they just stop being used. Control hadn't changed me. It had removed the noise that used to speak for me. Power doesn't announce itself. It prepares, quietly, on paper. And when it arrives, it doesn't raise its voice. It just stands. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. You can share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're listening from. I read them quietly, carefully. Stories told with clarity, boundaries, and real consequences live here. No noise, no spectacle. Just truth, documented and exact. Hello, I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together.